Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to your Lunch Break Live. My name is Savannah Herenque if you're new here, and if you're not, thank you for coming back. Today is Tuesday, October the 26th, and today I'm joined by what might be a familiar face, and that is our own reporter, William Thornton. Now, Bill has been covering something for several months, and I thought that we hadn't really updated you on it recently, so I thought this would be a good time. And this is a strike that is happening in Tuscaloosa County at the Brookwood mines of Warrior Met Coal. Now, the strike from the United Mine Workers of America started in April. It is still ongoing, again, October 26th. So, quite a long strike happening there. Bill has covered this strike from the beginning. And, Bill, I thought this was a good time to just update people on what was happening there. And we've actually had some new developments in the news of this strike with Warrior Met Coal saying that things are getting kind of violent out there.
Yeah, actually, the we started hearing some reports of violence in May, first from the union, and to give you some context. Okay, so the strike began on April 1st. About 2 weeks after the strike began, there was a tentative agreement between the company and the union, but it went back to the union members for approval, and they overwhelmingly voted it down as not being sufficient. So then about 2 or 3 weeks later, there began to be these incidents along the picket line between union members and miners coming into work. We're talking, this is about 1,100 members of the union are striking, but they still have people who are going into the coals who are not part of the union who are working every day. So what's happening is when people come through the picket line, there are union members standing there trying to bar their way. The state troopers have been used to bust the workers in to try and avoid some of this. Company went to the trouble of getting a restraining order to try to stop some of these incidents. And it's a strike, so there's what the union says, there's what the company says. But the company has been very quiet about things for a while, and then yesterday they put out a statement saying that the violence has gotten noticeably more noticeable. I can rephrase that better, but basically it's gotten worse in the last week or so. And they also went to the trouble of putting out video where you see smashed windows in cars, things like that. It's a social media age, so both the union and the company have made use of videos that they share on social media. Union members talking about how they've been hit by cars coming into work. And then the company put these videos out showing smashed windows, things like that. There's been reports of vandalism that the company put out. There's been, it's a contentious thing. It's been going on for 7 months now. So, and
7 months is a long time. And you made a good point there, Bill. And that is saying that, strikes have happened for many years, for a long time. But the different thing about this is, again, we're in that social media age, like you mentioned. So there's a lot more documentation that can happen on both sides of this, on Warrior Met Coal or on the mine workers the union workers from the United Mine Workers of America. So again, this is happening at those Brookwood mines in Tuscaloosa County that are owned by Warrior Met Coal. You mentioned about 1,100 members of the union are striking there. And something interesting that you've just said as well is that in the social media age, we've got people from both groups, from the company and from the union, who can put out their narrative of what is happening using video, using social media and YouTube and things like that to get their point across. But often you've got just a pointing fingers game of the company maybe saying that, look, this violence is being caused by the strikers. The strikers saying, no, this is caused by the company. So how do we get to the root of what is really happening here, Bill?
Well, okay, so the point of contention basically is this. About 5 years ago, Warrior Met Coal kind of emerged from this bankruptcy, and the miners there renegotiated a contract to keep the company afloat. And from their perspective, they gave up a lot to get that. They gave up pay and benefits. And the new contract that the company offered they feel like did not restore any of that, or to a sizable degree. To their mind, they have made a lot of sacrifices over the last 5 years, and were with the understanding that at some point when things got better, they would see this reflected in the contract. Trying to figure out who's telling the truth here or whatever. You can imagine that nobody who got into this back in April thought we would still be at this position here in late October. I'll tell you a quick story. The union had a solidarity demonstration down in Brookwood. I think it was back in August, and members of several unions, not just miners, but unions from all over the country came. There were several thousand people at this. It was a very big demonstration. Well, I was talking to somebody who was with the mine workers, who actually is fourth generation coal miners from West Virginia. Where you think they have a very long history of this sort of thing. And I asked him, I said, have you ever been through a strike like this? And he said, no, this has gone on much longer than anything we were ever involved in. So, what you have here is a situation where neither the company nor the union thought we would still be in this position this far in. And you talk to the union, are we any closer to a deal? And they say, well, the company's not really being serious about this sort of thing. You talk to the company's saying union's not budging on this. So, trying to determine who is, who's closer or whatever. There's going to have to be a situation where at some point, they sit down and try to work this thing out. But going back to your original position, I'll make it quick. What we're seeing here in terms of telling your story, it's the same thing we saw with Amazon and the union that was trying to organize out there. Both sides are trying to get their narrative out through their own media. You see a lot of resources in, on-camera interviews and, trying to make their point that they're not at fault, or, that it doesn't have to be this way or whatever. And, that we're seeing that not just in terms of strikes, but also, large corporations have the ability to tell their own story through video and through their own storytelling.
No, and you're right, Bill. And I wanted to bring up that Amazon connection here. This is a tale as old as time, right? One person wants their story to get out there, and another person wants their story. That's not unique in this. The unique situation, though, is we're at a time, whether you're talking about big corporations, whether you're talking about politics, about unions, et cetera, people have the means now to be able to share their message in the way they want to share their message, and they do not have to rely on the more traditional types of messaging, traditional media. They don't have to rely on it. They can create their own messaging. And that's what's interesting here about this. And you also mentioned that we did not expect, and meaning we, I don't think anybody expected the strike to go on this long, over 7 months, coming up on 8 months here. And this is about 1,100 workers who have walked off the job, who are striking there in Brookwood. So something that I wanted to ask you is something that I think a lot of people might be thinking right now. Look, you and I, Bill, we don't work there. We don't work in the mines. We are not part of that union. And this is also something that a lot of people probably aren't as in tune with. Maybe they do not know any workers that work in coal mines or that are part of a union such as the United Mine Workers of America. So how does this affect the average everyday person like you or myself who are not there, and we are not feeling maybe the direct effects of this, but what kind of after effects could we get from this strike?
Well, okay, so Warrior mines met coal, which is basically coal that's used in steel production and other uses, and mostly in foreign markets. But if you're talking about how it affects Alabama, I've talked to some of these union members, when they knew that the contract was coming up, some of them began putting away money because, you're gonna have car payments, you're gonna have house payments, you're gonna have to feed your family and all that kind of thing. And I would imagine that a lot of those resources, relying on themselves, have been more or less depleted. There have been the union has made strike contributions in terms of helping people on the line with living expenses. There's been a food bank. There's currently the ability to try to get toys for families at Christmas. That's how far ahead they're trying to look in this thing. How does it affect Alabama? You can see what happens when you have 1,000 people who are, not making their living right now. And, it's not surprising that you're going to see reports that violence is increasing because, people who are been in this position, they want a resolution to this. So, because, if you don't see there's any hope in sight or any end in sight, you've got to feed your family. You've got to make those house payments. You got to make those car payments. So, and I think right now anybody can understand that, especially with the price of everything going up, and the larger story that you see where so many places are not having the kind of labor amounts that they need in terms of employees on the job.
Well, and also you mentioned that this met coal goes to making steel. So could we see steel prices increase or see a shortage of steel from this?
Probably not. What you're going to see, I would be, one of the things I'm looking ahead to is next week, Warrior Met does their third quarter earnings report. And in the second quarter, they said, I can't remember exactly the figure, but they are losing money as a result of this. They do have workers who are continuing to mine, so they did make preparations before this. Beyond just what is happening at Warrior Met, I looked it up, and right now in America, there are 40 different work stoppages going on around the country involving unions. It's everything from John Deere manufacturing to McDonald's. There's some McDonald's restaurants where people are striking. Hollywood, one of their larger technical unions, came very close to a strike last week. Some people are calling this Striketober, where you see a lot of unions are. This is probably an outgrowth of the pandemic, when so many people began this kind of irregular work schedule, where you had people who were working remotely from home, where they were never actually off. They were always on the job. But you also had people who were declared essential workers who were, in some ways risking their lives to go into the job under the threat of coronavirus. And people are, have been in this kind of pandemic mode for almost 2 years now, and frankly, they're tired of it. So, what you're seeing at Warrior Met in some ways is an outgrowth of some of these other issues that we're seeing around the country, where workers are getting, kind of fed up with the sacrifices that they've made. Several million people quit their jobs in August. And employers are finding it harder to fill those positions, and you see that some of that power is migrating back to the worker, who is saying, "Hey, I'm not going to put up with this. I can find something better."
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point to make, Bill. And this is probably just one of these after effects of coronavirus and of the pandemic that we're probably going to be seeing here for a while to come. Now, a lot of people have asked something, and I don't know that you know the answer, but I'm going to ask you anyway and put you on the spot here. But we know that, again, these mine workers are looking for better conditions. Specifically, I think they are asking for higher pay and more benefits. Those they lost when the company had declared bankruptcy several years ago, as you mentioned earlier. They're saying, look, you can give it back to us now because we made those concessions. We want it back. So what exactly did they lose, and what are they wanting back? So do you know the hourly wage that these employees are making, or the specific benefits that they don't have that they're seeking?
When I spoke to some union members earlier this year, I asked them those questions, and one of the things that they mentioned was the ability to take time off. There was and I'm trying to remember this just off the top of my head, but if one guy in particular said that if you had to take time off for medical or for bereavement or whatever, you had to get it okayed, and it was a very complicated process, or they might come back and say, well, that's not good enough, whereas before in the earlier contract, that wouldn't have been an issue. Also, I think there was a reduction in pay grade, and forgive me, I'm doing this off the top of my head, but the union was very clear that what they gave up was on the assurance that when times got better, they would get that back. Now, the complicating part of this, of course, was last year when coronavirus restrictions came down and the demand for this kind of coal went down as well. So the company feels like they lost a lot of money last year. And the union would point to any bonuses that executives got. So again, you have this back and forth sort of thing. But the gap between what they lost and what they were offered this time, when the company tried to make that up in that tentative agreement back in April, the union just said, nah, you can do better than that.
This is a complicated issue, Bill. I know you said that there are people preparing for the strike to go on even through Christmas. I think you said there were people who were trying to prepare for some type of organized way to help strikers get presents for their children at Christmas and for other things. So we could see this strike go on even a little bit longer. But do you have any sense, again, of maybe with these reports from both sides of violence increasing, that we're any closer to a resolution?
No, I not anything publicly. I mean, like I said, nobody, I don't think saw it happening this long. And you talk to the mine workers, they don't want to be on strike. They want to be working. And the company wants them to be working too. It's just, trying to get that last mile, trying to figure it out. And like I said, next week with the earnings report, it may be a little bit more clear how much money the company is losing as a result of this strike, or how much production has been down. But I'd be honest with you, I don't really know. In fact, I'll go out and say this: the company's statement yesterday was probably the first time that they've said anything publicly along these lines. When I've tried to get comments from them, and they've not really wanted to talk all that much about it. But the fact that they made that comment in some ways shows that they and the union are getting to a point where there's got to be some kind of resolution to this one way or another, I think. So maybe that's a hopeful sign. I don't know.
There's a lot going on at the mines over in Brookwood, owned by Warrior Met Coal in Tuscaloosa County, and it's something that I know we all need to pay attention to. So, Bill, thank you for paying attention for us and for reporting on that.
Thanks.
We will be keeping an eye out for all of your coverage, including the news from that earnings report coming out next week. And I know that you will have that for us on AL.com. So, Bill, thank you so much again. Everybody watching, thank you so much, and we will see you tomorrow.